All right, welcome back to Homebrew Astra Militarum and Tactica. This is going to be another short lore video today. What we're going to try and discuss is how many Imperial transports are across the Imperium now. So I know in the last video I did suggest that it probably would be unquantifiable, but as you may have noticed and as I forgot to mention is that we were given some brief numbers in the Battlefleet Gothic sourcebook. So if you recall back to the Imperial Transport section I cut out and used as a background image, I'll put it back up for this one here as well, is that it says hundreds, perhaps thousands of transport ships participated in the Gothic War. The vast majority were chartered merchants pressed into service to move war materials to systems under blockade. So what that does is we can use our previous formula, try and estimate how many ships as a percentage were used, or I should say conscripted, out of the entire, say, flotilla in the Gothic sector. We then use that figure as an example as the average across the Imperium. So I'm going to base this off roughly off historical figures again. So if we look at manpower and the percentage of manpower of population that were conscripted and actually then deployed to the armed forces, or at least servicemen in total in the armed forces as per population, according to World War II at least, most countries, so like the US, Italy, for example, would typically have anywhere from about 8% to about 12% of their population in the armed forces. If you wanted to get something crazy, Germany had up to about 35% from memory conscripted up, well, at least deployed into the armed forces as a percentage of their total population. But I do believe that last example of Germany is not a good one, just because they were in the essentially at the precipice of total war, and then they were fighting until absolute defeat. So there was no way they would win at that point. Their economy was crippled and they're at the point of no return. So we're going to use basically the prior former figures. So we'll use a couple like we did last time to get a bit of a range. So I'll have 3 examples. So we'll go off 8% of the numbers given as proportionate of the conscripted ships as to the whole merchant fleet in that sector, because obviously you'd still have civil trade going on. Otherwise, the Gothic sector wouldn't function. Then we'll have a 10% one and then a 12.5% one. So if we assume 500 vessels is 8% of the total flotilla across the Gothic sector of Imperial Transports, that gives us about 6,250 Imperial Transports across that entire sector. Now, if we go back to our original formula of 1 million worlds, dividing that to 125 worlds to a sector, that gave us about 8,000 sectors. So if we put those two numbers together, so 8,000 times 6,250, that gives us 50 million transports across the Imperium. If we take that value to something a bit larger, so we say 1 million worlds, divide that by 100 worlds to a sector, that gives us 10,000 sectors. And then we assume that when they go into the hundreds or perhaps thousands, we'll just assume 1,000, so we'll try and split the difference. And then we assume that's 10% of the total flotilla. That gives us 10,000 vessels inside just the Gothic sector. So we take the 10,000 sectors times the 10,000 vessels. That gives us 100 million Imperial transports across the Imperium. Now then, if we go for an even higher value, so we go to 12.5%. So again, we go 1 million worlds, divide 80. That actually gives us 12,500 sectors. And then if we go to the next assumption of 2,000 transports were conscripted to fight in the Imperial Navy, then try and formulate what the actual number is. So 12.5% goes up to 16,000 vessels in total. And then so basically we take the 16,000 times that by 12,500, and that gives us 200 million vessels across the Imperium as trade vessels. Now, I think this is one of the circumstances where Games Workshop might not have gotten their scale correct. We could do, say, another figure of 15%, assuming 3,000. So we could technically go as high as about 9,000, because it says thousands, not tens of thousands, and that might give us a much larger number. But even then, if we do that, I doubt we'd get much higher than single billions. So whilst that still is a lot more transport vessels compared to how many actual naval vessels there are across the Imperium, that still does seem quite small for an industry that has to supply an entire universe. So what I might just quickly do is I might just quickly do the math for maybe even a higher scale. So I'll do a 9,000 with a 15%. So just bear with me 1 second. I'll come straight back. All right, so I've just done the quick math. So basically, if we assume 9,000 ships were conscripted to help the Navy, and that was approximately 15% of the total transport vessels in that sector, that would give us a total fleet of 60,000 in the Gothic sector. Now, if we times 60,000 by 12,500 using the 1 million worlds divided by 80, that gives us 750 million transports across the Imperium. Now, as I said earlier, I doubt it would have went into the, very further than the single billion. So it was actually a little bit smaller than what I was thinking off the top of my head. But I think if we go somewhere between those latter two figures, so the 200,000 and 750,000, that's probably where the actual Imperial Transports are situated. Now, just bear in mind that Imperial Transports are only one type of class of merchant vessels throughout the Imperium. There are armed merchants, there are Q ships, there's blockade runners. Yeah, so we have, what else is there? Troop transports, heavy transports, fast clippers, what else? Top of my head, fuel transports. There's mass conveyors. Yeah, so that Imperial Transport, whilst that does cover like a decent branch of traditional trading ships, it doesn't actually encompass the entirety of Imperial Transports across the Imperium. So that at least gives us a number for that particular type of vessel. So just to reiterate, it'd be somewhere around 750,000 between 200,000 is the lowest point I'd probably go. So somewhere between there is how many of those actual Imperial Transports are scattered across the Imperium, delivering food, materials every single day. Thank you.